So this is our first Fighting Bull series. The reason we wanted to do this is to give the community reason to be optimistic and see that there's companies out there kicking butt, or at least trying to, and out there fighting back. And you're the first ones I thought of. Love to bring you guys on and have you guys be our first contestants. And just, give a voice of optimism during these tough times.
Cool stuff. No, and great to have you. When Brian approached me and said that would be a great idea to use a couple of cases and interview founders, I thought that is a great thing. I'm Christian Magel. I'm the founder of and CEO of Venture Lane. We're a startup hub here in Boston for about 20 early stage tech companies. So I'm surrounded by founders all day long. I've founded startups in 3 continents and have weathered several crises, as Brian has, from the mid 90s to the dot-com boom to the global financial crisis. And together with Brian, I want to help startups and founders to go through this crisis and really come out stronger with their companies. So my goal here is really to, how can we learn from the best entrepreneurs, and then really what is the practical help in the current situation, and how to deal with a crisis which is very unprecedented as we see it playing out. So I just wanted to, before we do the introduction, Kevin and Tarek, just a quick couple of rules. We have a Q&A channel. If you look down there and you hover over your bottom part, there should be a Q&A. This is where we're taking questions, so feel free to put your questions in there, and we'll go through the interview with those two, and then come back to your questions. And this is going to be a 30-minute exercise before we go to the questions from the audience. And Brian, I'll pass on to you now.
Yeah, I've known you guys for a couple of years now. Obviously, as early investor, and love the work that you've always done. But I'd like you guys, this, as Christian mentioned, this is my 5th crisis. So hopefully I can be of help, but this is definitely a different one than I've seen before. If you guys can just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about Fairmarkit, describe the business model, how big your team is, and kind of where you guys are at right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian, you were in the trenches with us. I think it was just Tarek, myself, and Victor about 3 years ago. So you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well, this is it's true.
So Kevin Frechette, co-founder and CEO. We've been doing Fairmarkit now for just over 3 years. We're just under 70 people. We raised our Series A about 5 months ago with Insight. Is an $11 million Series A. And I'll let Tarek do the intro in a second, but at a high level, we're a machine learning based SaaS platform that helps companies source out automatically their purchases. We work with companies like ServiceNow, Univision Communications, the Mass Bay Transit Authority here in Boston. And essentially the core premise is that procurement's very old, it's very clunky, it's not data driven. And because of that, it's wildly inefficient for not just procurement, but the end users. So we go in, we help these organizations auto source what they're buying. So we help them get to a lower cost. We help them do it more efficiently from a human capital perspective. And we give them a lot of data to actually see what's happening and make more strategic decisions. So I'll pass it over to Tarek.
Yeah, Tarek Alaruri, co-founder and COO. And this is our first, Kevin and I's, crisis when it comes to fiscal responsibility. So it's a very interesting time, and I think we'll dive into it a little bit. But it's every state, every government has a different response or reaction. So I think a lot of companies are looking for their leadership to help drive the overall tone, and everybody's working from home. So it's made us closer as a group.
Awesome. How big is the team right now?
So we're just under 70. We have probably about 70% in the US, and then the rest international right now.
Okay, great. Awesome. Tell us a little bit, the market has changed so dramatically in the last 2-3 weeks, even to a point. I'm just coming off a CEO call with my CEOs. Like, we were just going back 2 weeks ago. We had, I think, 600 coronavirus cases in the US. Now we're at 44,000. Every day seems to be different. How is the market different today for you guys compared to a month ago?
Yeah. I mean, our value prop is to help companies save money and automate processes. And so we focus on enterprises over 1,000 people. So what we're seeing is a great sense of urgency from some of the larger enterprises and banks. We've actually had a few of the deals we're working actually accelerate in terms of timeline, just because there is that sense of urgency. But we're also seeing on the other side, budgets freeze, larger enterprises having to be more cost conscious. I think there's rumors of headcount reduction at certain larger companies. Like, I know in the Wall Street Journals, it's Boeing, Marriott, others. So it's also making sure that we're being cognizant of that as well. So, telling our sales team not to prospect after Marriott or, go after Boeing, but being aware with messaging that hits home. And we actually see this as a really big opportunity for our business right now.
Okay. So what is different in your how you treat your team and how you guys? I mean, obviously, I see you, Kevin, working remotely, possibly. What happened there?
Yeah, so I think, like every company, 2 weeks ago was, and still is, the time of uncertainty, where there's no right answer. And we talked to all of our advisors, we talked to our investors, we talked to other companies, and we went back and forth a lot of, okay, what do we do? When do we pull the trigger of work from home? How do we do it? Is there a risk of doing it? When it boiled down to it, we just made the judgment call that team's health comes first, above all else, no matter what. So let's just make sure first we're taking care of not just the people on our team, but then all of their loved ones and how they could potentially be impacted. And let's make sure we can foster a work environment where people can thrive on the work from home mentality. On top of it, a big piece for like what's changed, even at the company, is right now I think like probably most startups or most venture-backed companies, we're evaluating A, what's our current position, and B, how is that going to change? And how we're looking at the current position is saying, okay, what's our liquidity position? Are we strong or are we weak? So you can kind of measure yourself. And then you can say, okay, what's the demand change? Has it gone up because of the market? Because people need to find more suppliers, which is what we do. They need to save money. Or has it gone down? Maybe to Tarek's point, just because budgets are getting cut, things are being put on a freeze. So we kind of mapped it out in a quadrant of where do we fall on that? And then what we identified is that we still don't know the true impact of this situation. We're 2 or 3 weeks in, and like don't care who you ask. Month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, who knows? So for us, let's control what we can control, understand all the potential factors that could impact us, and then try to make strategic decisions on a weekly basis, not like thrash back and forth, but just over communicate and just try to be as transparent as possible, because there's really no right answer. It's just doing right by people and customers as we keep going.
Kevin, do you have any? Oh, sorry.
Sorry. So just one little deeper. So it seems that metrics are very important for you, and you deep dive into those. How transparent are you with the overall team about everything that's going on?
We had a meeting on Monday, so it was yesterday morning, where we talked about where we believe we are in that quadrant. We talked about the different steps other companies are taking, whether it's cash preservation, whether it's like holding on to your customers, whether it is accelerating because of the opportunity. And we walk through all the different potential things that actions you could take for each of those steps. And then we just try to over communicate even our current runway with our Series A, with our venture debt. There's really not a reason to hide anything because in reality, once again, we're all in it together, and no one has any idea of the right answer. It's just calculated guesses and listening to feedback and advice. So if everyone's in it together, everyone agrees to the plan that we're going on, you get the mutual buy-in that, okay, we're building this together. We're going to get through it. It is my first time and Tarek's first time going through this. We have senior members of the team where it's not. So they've been incredibly helpful as well. So it's kind of like all band together and try to accelerate at the very least, just make sure we get through and we do right by our customers.
Yeah, I think to Kevin's point, there's really only two things we can control, and it's, how hard we work, and then also being agile as a smaller company. So I think if there's two options, you can either, sit back on your heels, be like, hey, I hope cash doesn't run out, I'm not going to make any money, or try to capitalize on the opportunity and play to our strengths, which is if we outwork everybody right now, it's much easier for us to, make a quick pivot, change our messaging, change our go-to-market than it is for a company that is, we're in the same space as SAP, Oracle. If they wanted to capitalize on something quickly, that would take years. So for us, if we notice a little inflection on the market that we can go after, it's a great opportunity for us.
Got it.
You guys mentioned over communicate. Do you have any examples to share of ways that things you're doing with your team that are different than you were doing before? Obviously now working from home, but ways in which you're making that either fun or making that more livable, or finding ways that teams all feel like they're still part of your team in the way that you used to, or what are you doing differently?
I'll rattle off a couple things. We could always be doing more, and I know that we can be doing more. Simple thing is like a virtual happy hour. You think like, oh, how fun could it be? It was actually a really good time. We thoroughly enjoyed it. Monday, Friday meetings, making sure as a team we all get together at least twice a week. For the customers that we brought on this week, we typically do champagne in our office where everyone gets together, we blast music. So we're still working through that. We do a Zoom call where someone jumps on the audio. It doesn't work as great right now. We had a couple wins this last week. And then just making sure from a management perspective, the ask is the responsibility of everyone. Just like over communicate, managers to teams, teams to managers. And there's got to be just a high level of trust where we know everyone on our team is an A player. We expect that out of them, especially in a situation like this where everyone needs to be self-accountable. So just making sure you trust your team and support them where you can.
Yeah, and I think to Kevin's point, the bigger issue here is when teams are not over communicating and there's a lot of uncertainty, because that's the number one thing to erode trust. So to Kevin's point, just being able to say like, hey, this could go 6 months, this could go 9 months. Let's plan for the absolute worst, which is we're in our house for the foreseeable future, but let's make the most of this.
Tarek, a pretty swanky house back there too.
Yeah. Can I ask you? I'd be interested. Like, how much time goes into coping with the new situation, and how much do you stick, or what's the percentage of that you stick with old priorities and the way that you guys planned it out even long before this all happened, versus how much time actually goes into refining the approach, doing things differently, maybe taking a whole different path forward? What's the ratio?
So I think it's, still operating on the status quo and understanding where your business is going, but being able to quickly adjust things on the fly. And I can give you a concrete example. For instance, we go after tail spend, or the space that's the 80-20 rule, but for procurement or businesses spending. And we've noticed that, with recent economic situations, not all the companies we work with are trying to save on just tail spend. They want to use us for more spend. They want to use us, where we provide a 10% savings on, what could be $20-30 million. Companies are looking at their whole budget and saying like, hey, can we apply the same logic of your tool and maybe get the possibility of $100 million savings? So being able to quickly adjust the messaging for our sales reps when they have meetings coming in has really accelerated some of the deals as well.
Sorry, Tarek, just for the people that don't know what tail spend is, can you just briefly explain what that is and what that difference that you're doing now, like why that's important?
Yeah, sorry, I'm way too in the weeds of procurement on a day-to-day basis. No, tail spend is the concept of the 80-20 rule, or power law distribution, that 20% of businesses spending makes up 80% of the things they buy. It's the same type of logic in your everyday life. So historically in an up market, for the last few years, businesses are, trying to cut costs, but more or less they're trying to automate more of the workflow. So figure out, their largest expense is people. So figuring out where they can offload some of the people's tasks. And so that's where our solution was very applicable. Now they're looking at more of the spend and saying, hey, larger contracts we have, we need to renegotiate because of these large times. More of this spending, can you guys do more than, just 20% of my spend? Can you guys do 50% of my spend, 60% of my spend? So for us, it's also a bigger business opportunity, but it also helps us move the needle for some of these companies more than just tail spend.
Christian, you brought up though something that's interesting. I literally had written on a Post-it right here. It says the new normal is coming. And that's what we got from Henry over at 1984. Oh, sorry, New Fund. And essentially the mentality is, even when we get through this, there's still a new normal coming. You can't just go back to status quo. And you might see it from like more remote work. You might just see it from a frugality perspective of how people are managing their budgets. The one thing that can be a consistent, whether it's the current state, the future state, is just staying true to kind of the core values and how you want the team to be operating. That's something that is what you can control. So for us, it's being accountable, it's being positive. It's making sure everyone's still operating the same way, just doing it, whether it's, to Tarek's point, going after the market in a different way. It could be really doing the scenario plannings with your budget for 50 to 75% of bookings and renewal, and just understanding how are we going to operate in the future. But that's something that I literally look at all day. Like, the new normal is coming. We don't know what it is, but to Tarek's point, we have to be agile and not just sticking to what's got us to this point.
I love it. Yeah, the new normal. Brian, do you want to go a little bit into sales?
Yeah, sorry, there was a question. I was just reviewing that. So you mentioned that changing your messaging, and I've spoken to you a little bit about this, Tarek, but maybe if you can go into a little more detail. Because the market has shifted, if you changed your target markets at all, have you had to dramatically change your messaging? And if so, what did you do and how quickly did you act?
Well, I think we're just trying to be conscious of people, right? And I think this whole, concept of working remotely, the whole concept of uncertainty is really related to a human issue. We don't sell to restaurants, but that would probably be one of the last businesses that we would have our sales team reach out to right now. Just due to the uncertainty. And, a lot of the people you talk to, they have things outside of life or work that they're probably thinking of. And I think somebody just actually asked that question on the Q&A, but it's, hey, how do you help with people's, mental attitude going into it? And I think that is obviously, sales is a really mental aspect. It's like sports, there's a lot of rejection. And then when there's something that's macro here, it makes it even worse. So I think it's, not playing counselor, but also picking your team up when they have a hard day. Not everybody's going to want to take a meeting. People in the restaurant industry definitely not going to want to take a meeting right now. But there are some industries like manufacturing, aerospace, a couple others that are, prime for our platform. So it's making sure that you I wouldn't say, narrow the scope down, but you'd be super cognizant of who you're going after and the message that you're trying to impact.
Have you seen a change in your team? I mean, in the way in which they step up, or any of them freeze? I've seen across companies that I work with a dramatic difference. Some people are like a deer in the headlights, and they're frozen, they're paralyzed, and some people are punching hard and going forward. Within your own teams, are you seeing that?
We're definitely seeing people are punching hard and going forward. In our interview process and just like hopefully the culture that we build, everybody, I always say get after it, for lack of better words, but people are just really trying their best. Honestly, things like this are, add some spice to it, right? Like, it's easy to sell when everybody wants to talk to you. It's easy, to get deals when, companies have unlimited budgets, but one of our sales rep yesterday brought in 2 deals during an economic meltdown and a pandemic. That guy is a hero, right? So I would say things like that is really when the tough get going, and it's exciting to watch and help nurture that. Anything you got to add to that, Kevin?
Yeah, I'd say to go on to it, like, the whole culture is grit. That was our company kickoff, is like Grit 2020, which plays into having to work from home, having to help customers through like the economic and the current kind of situation across the board. The one thing that we haven't seen is a decrease in productivity. We've actually seen the exact opposite, where we've seen people increase from like our sales activity metrics. They went up last week, and that was our first full week mandatory work from home. The thing to balance, and it's even for myself, and I did a webinar last week with someone in the procurement space, is like, how do you make sure you're dialed in, but you take a second to breathe? How can you just like detach for even like 10 minutes, but more so like, how do you get the team to detach? And whether it's a FaceTime, it's a phone call, whatever it is, I struggled with it in the beginning, and it just like, the only thing I found is call someone, don't talk about work, talk about something else, talk about what's going on in their house, just like anything else. That turning your brain off for a couple minutes, it helps tremendously in terms of, rather than sitting down at 7 and standing up like at 7 o'clock. So it's something that I imagine a lot of teams are struggling with or trying to work on, and that's one of the things that we are.
Yeah, and that's getting out of the green and enjoying a little bit the nature. Actually, this morning we do every morning, 6:45 to 7 o'clock, a meditation over Zoom,
We have
which
12,
is really great. Kind of grounds everybody on the call, gets you out of the bed, and gets you started into a routine.
You know what? What's tough is that you're in meeting to meeting to meeting. Like, it's definitely impolite to be a few minutes late to Zoom. But I was talking to our sales director, and he essentially was like, "Look, I got up at 7 a.m. and then was on Zoom until like 8 p.m. I haven't ate. I've used the restroom once today. Like, it's like, hey, you got to take care of yourself. So if you're a few minutes late to Zoom meetings every now and then, like, to Kevin's point, like, take a breather."
Okay, great. One quick question: if you had to look out for 3 metrics right now in your current business, what would be those 3?
So for us, usage is always a big one. Understanding how customers are leveraging the platform, because that aligns directly to the value that we provide to them. So really, we used to track it on like a biweekly basis, but really digging in even more, because there can be very explainable reasons for why usage is going down for some customers or why it's going up. But it's just good to get temp on it, because although we feel like, hey, things are going well working remote, definitely we could be missing something. We could be dropping the ball. There could be a bottleneck that we're not following up on. So we want to be very, very conscious of that. Second one being I guess we don't have a metric around it, but just like the internal communication, making sure that everyone's on the same page, of just like what's happening in the company, whether it's the bookings number, whether it's the runway, whatever it is, because I think that helps with transparency.
If there was a number for alignment, it would be that. Yeah.
Yeah. If there was this fictional number, maybe it'll come up because of the current market situation. Yeah. And then the final one is still from a pipeline perspective. I know we've heard the horror stories of how pipeline could dissolve in a moment when it comes to an economic downturn. And for us, it's not using the current situation as an excuse to say, this is why our pipeline went down. This is why we missed our bookings number, but attacking it head on, acknowledging that's real. So we don't want to be naive to the fact that it's a very unique time, but let's keep tracking the metrics that have gotten us here. And then understand if there's a dip, why is it? And then how can we use the situation to go on the offensive to actually increase that number?
Yeah. And I think it's over communicating, like, hey, there is a huge likelihood that there is going to be, say, a 50% reduction. Because on the other side, if there's not a 50% reduction, we're going to come out even better than we were before. That's the idea of this.
Kevin, you said that last week your sales, or maybe it was Tarek, your last week your sales metrics were up. So everybody's pulling their weight and doing what they need to. Have you seen a difference in the next line of the metrics, the next line of the sales math, the results, the number of bookings, meetings set, the number of demos scheduled? Are you seeing a reduction in that, or as a percentage, or is that staying the same?
So we just had the marketing meeting. We reviewed even like our month over month metrics, and everything is still going up to the right. We haven't seen the impact as much. And then even from a bookings perspective, we've had a couple of projects where the current market has changed the situation, not necessarily said, okay, this deal's off the table, but just kind of changed the timeline a little bit. But to Tarek's point earlier too, we have brought in a few different deals over the last week and a half. So that shows us, and we do work with large enterprises, which it's not like it's still, I think the small businesses might be reacting a little more in a thrashing mode, where if you're a Fortune 500 company, you're still being strategic, but you're not kind of completely derailing all your projects.
Yeah, I think Jonathan, on that note, asked the question, what's happening to your marketing budget, knowing people are distracted and polluted with the COVID-19 message? I think one thing we're trying to stay away from is just like the fear and gloom COVID-19, right? But as a result, the market's going down. Companies are needing to figure out how to cut costs. And that's just applicable for us, but I think it's also applicable to other businesses, how it resonates. Like I know a company you work with, Brian, Rakim, for instance, his company helps with, part-time workers, and there's a huge surge. So I don't think the message for marketing has to be around like the doom and gloom of talking about COVID. I think it's more about what the results and the outcome are. Like the webinar Kevin did last week was about tips and tricks to work remotely that we're going to be publishing this week for procurement teams. That's something that a lot of companies have never talked about. So I think it's about how you can create, engaging content at these times that'll help drag those leads through the funnel.
Yeah, I'm recommending to all the companies I work with not to use the word COVID-19 in any of their messaging. You can talk about the results of it or the external parts of it, but don't use COVID-19.
Yeah,
Right.
I think CNN and Fox does enough of COVID-19 for the rest of the world.
Yeah, we for a while, Brian, we didn't talk about it at all, and we just completely kept it out. We stayed true to our message, and then we just hit this point where it wasn't just jumping on the bandwagon. It's okay. This is real. This is what companies are dealing with, and in our world, we're in supply chain and procurement. So it causes massive disruptions for a lot of our customers. So even we talked about the cost savings, the other side of the coin is now you have to find preferred 1, 2, and 3 suppliers for XYZ good or service that you run your business on. So it was just so relevant, but it was a tough inflection point of when do we start talking about it? Because you don't want to expose or exploit it. You want to use it as a way to educate and show how we can help and mind share with other people.
And one last thing on the topic of sales, it is just a classic easy out. Like if you're talking about just, hey, I don't have time, I have COVID, that is the easiest excuse. And every week it's going to be something different. Like before it was, I'm too busy. Now it's, hey, COVID-19, I'm heads down, I'm too busy. Next month, who knows? It's going to be aliens. Nobody knows, right? So it's just like control what you can control, push back on it. Okay, COVID, you need to cut costs. We can help with that.
Love the spirit. Brian, as we're moving to the last question, I would want to encourage everybody who is on this webinar to actually post a couple of questions. We have already some here. We're collecting them, and we have 15 minutes time then to go through those. Brian, you want to go with our last question?
I have a question, and this is: are you hiring? Not that I'm looking for a job, but are you hiring?
So we're hiring right now. We're not throwing a freeze on it. We're being strategic in terms of the roles that we're bringing in still and the candidates. The big thing is we're going to see how the next 1 or 2 weeks shake out, because that will also help us determine, are we throttling? In which case, that's a great market to throttle in, because there's more talent on the market as well, because if the opportunity is there, but we're not going to expand recklessly and then have to pull back. That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's unfair to people. I think the biggest thing right now is the uncertainty. So making sure that we, build that certainty with our team, because a lot of other companies, in Boston, in the tech space, are going to be reducing headcount. So if we're able to come out of this and put the pedal down to the pedal down, we're going to be able to get really on, which for the last couple of years has been pretty hard. So it's a 180, and it could be a pretty good thing for us.
Okay. Tarek and Kevin, as a last question from us, short answer, what keeps you up at night right now, and what are you most excited about, each of you?
What keeps me up at night is how many companies I still can sell to.
And what are you most excited about?
I'm excited, honestly. This is going to sound weird, but this is the first time we've been running a business. And this is the first macro crisis that we've had that's out of our control. And it not only does it test us as leaders, but it's kind of fun. The tough get going in uncertain situations. Diamonds are built, during a lot of pressure.
Under pressure, yeah.
And I think our team's responding in an incredible way, especially when we have people that are 1 year out of college and they're stepping up as leaders and, adding clarity and just being a rock that we can build a team upon, and it's really awesome to watch that firsthand.
Okay, Kevin.
Yeah, main thing is that I'd be worried about that we're working on is making sure everyone on our team knows the mission, is on board with the mission, is taking a leadership role, even if they're not a manager. It gets very easy if you work from home, which is our first time doing it, I imagine, to kind of just get set in your ways and to kind of lose touch a little bit with the team, the momentum and the energy of the team. So that's something that I'm super, super conscious of, that I want to make sure we stay all over. And the thing I'm most excited about is exactly what Tarek said. This is a new barrier, new challenge, a new opportunity that we've never gone through. And it's a really good opportunity also for the people on our team, the people close to Fairmarkit, to shine, to help advise, to share their experience and kind of take even more of a leadership role. So I'm excited to learn as we go through this whole process.
Awesome. Good stuff. Yeah, great learnings and nuggets in there. As we turn now to the questions from the audience, again, the channel is open, Q&A just down here. Give us a couple of questions. We'll go through step by step. Some of them we touched a little bit, like Jonathan is asking, in the current context and the part of virtual happy hours, what can you do to really ensure people are okay? So, a lot of people work from home, they have anxiety, people work from home with kids, they have different environments. What can you do? What's your advice for a founder to be out there and reassuring their team that things are okay and how to cope with the new circumstances?
Yeah, I think the first step that you can do is first try to understand who's in that situation or where the macro level concerns the company. Highly recommended, something that we do is do something called pulse surveys. It goes right into Slack. And so once a week, we can send in a survey to all the different employees. It's anonymous to see how they're feeling on different topics. You do that, takes like 2 minutes. You get the survey results, and then you can understand where are some areas that we have to focus on more. Without that, you're really at the mercy of someone feeling comfortable telling you or telling a member of your team, which you would absolutely hope for, but you can't always rely on.
Love it. Great
Nice.
advice. Thanks.
Okay, good. Another question from Jonathan was, I think we touched what's happening to the marketing budget, knowing that people are distracted and polluted with COVID. I mean, I think we've kind of said try to stay away. But what's the message that you would give to somebody who can't sell on the message of, hey, you save 50%?
Yeah, I think it has to be relevant to your industry. I can't speak to everything. But as I said before, there's other issues and ripple effects of this virus that are going on. So I think it's highlighting the ripple effect, but also drawing attention. There are certain industries that are taking off right now, which is obviously like remote work, right? And some of the companies that are built right now that are not Zoom can really, make themselves a thought leader in this space. It could be something else like Rakeem's company with part-time work being able to help, step up for employee safety or employee tracking or create awareness. So it's doing things outside of what your business might normally do, but is part of the ripple effect that can help draw awareness to what you're doing.
Awesome.
One of the things, just if I can throw in there, Tarek, that I picked up from you guys early on is your messaging didn't actually mention COVID-19, although you mentioned the results of it. And you also spoke about how you can help. And I really love that message of, you're having a hard time finding spot pricing. We're here to help.
Yeah. Also, everybody's online right now. Like it's like a giant social experiment. There's no conferences. Everybody's on, LinkedIn.
Hence the timing being perfect for this.
And by the way, just to throw in a bit of experience with my companies, like a lot of them actually, made some of their products or parts of them free to help out a couple of companies and a couple of people that are in that, and so they can try it out, use it, and with no risk. So that's always a good strategy.
We've actually done that with because we can help people find additional vendors and suppliers for goods and services. As you can imagine, the most sought after right now are the N95 masks, are gowns, like goggles, everything for hospital use or healthcare. So we've been helping our current customers with it, but we've also did an outreach to all the local healthcare institutions and across the nation. Not even trying to sell our service, just sharing different suppliers that we can find that still have inventory or have a very small backlog for the inventory. And it's just first of all, doing the right thing. Second of all, just helping people when help is needed. That can only be positive for them and long-term for us, a potential partnership. But if it's something we can do, that's good. Awesome. Happy to do it.
Nice. Awesome. Good stuff. Sean asked, at what point do you think you start to understand the new normal and really can take appropriate action? So what's your gauge? How are you gauging the time frame right now?
So we have our end of quarter on Tuesday, like probably a lot of companies. And then we'll see month one of Q2. The thought is by the end of month one, we'll have a very good idea of, even from like a demand perspective, what that new normal looks like. From a work from home perspective, we're setting the expectation that it's likely longer than you think. And like, you never know, but it's probably going to be longer than you think. But in terms of this scenario planning, it's all based off of like, how do we perform the next month and a half, and what indicators do we start to see either going up or going down, and then just making strategic decisions around it.
Yeah, I think the adage of starting a company is it takes more money and way longer than you think it will. So we're just applying
#Eric Kagan.
We're applying the same exact logic to this crisis. There's different, every country, every state has a different policy on this. So who knows what's going to happen? Let's just control what we can control.
Yeah, and maybe something that when we're talking to our companies, like the time frame that might be valid, probably another 40 days in terms of self-quarantining and working from home. Could be a little more, could be a little less, somewhere between 3 and 8 weeks. And then, we will definitely see, this quarter and next quarter, with quite some impact on the all the results of big companies. So after that, we'll have to see.
Incredible amount of like clickbait fake news out there.
Yeah.
So, I think that you asked the question earlier, how do you help with employee psyche? I think it's all like reiterating that there's fake news out there about this situation that's not 100% accurate. And a lot of people are just writing things to write things or saying things to things.
Yeah. Ivan was asking about messaging and how can you frame the messaging so that it's not coming across insensitive?
So for us, it's no different than how we normally approach a sales conversation, where you're not going into any conversation trying to pitch. You're not trying to sell the solution. It's going in, trying to uncover a need and do diagnostics to figure out what's important to the people that you're talking to. What do they care about? What does their team care about? What does their business care about? How do they quantify it? What's the urgency behind it? How do they prioritize it? And then kind of understanding like what exactly would you help to address, and is that important? And then positioning the solution around that. So I'd say that's probably the easiest way to be sensitive about the fact and not to assume anything, is just to ask questions and be curious and then learn before you actually talk.
I also think it's, just putting it front and center when you're running a sales deal. Like obviously it's at the top of mind. So, if you're far along in a campaign or you're at the beginning, it's always, it doesn't hurt to ask the question like, hey, how does COVID-19, how does it affect the situation of, Fairmarkit and XYZ company? Or how does it impact your procurement strategy for 2020?
Yeah. And a quick question here, quick answer from Ian. Do you think Fairmarkit will do better in the current market, or because you're in the cost reduction area, or in a strong, robust economy?
We believe better. We want to make sure that we validate that with numbers first. But if you look at spend management, which is the market that we're in, 2008 Coupa took off, 2008 Workday took off, 2001 Amazon took off. So based off historics, people care about saving money more when it's a down economy, but we don't want to assume it. We want to let the data tell before we actually look to accelerate.
Okay, cool. Uwe, hey Uwe, when you're listening, friend of mine asking question, thanks for your openness. What do you guys need most now to make decisions and come to your next steps? What is it that you need right now in order to make decisions on next steps?
Yeah, I think it's just having data in front of you, and also, being, one of the things I try to do from a sales perspective is I try to talk to all our, entry-level salespeople, or like SDRs, at least once a week. Finding out how the market is, finding out how, prospects are pushing back, seeing if anything changes on the front lines, and having like a pulse on it really helps.
I'd say the other thing is not having a unanimous decision be like what you need, because there's a million different viewpoints and everything. So not everyone's going to agree on everything. So it's very good to have like that back and forth and have people challenge each other and to kind of like take different stances. And Brian's seen it a million times, even at Fairmarkit. But the biggest thing is just to keep the respect, the positivity when you're doing it, because everyone is defending their position for the same thing. They want to do what's best for the company. And it's really making sure we present all the information, making a decision, and then as a team supporting that decision, knowing that it might not be the right one. But if it's not, we'll evaluate it and we'll change to a new one. But I think for companies that have just like, okay, we have to do this or we have to do this, they might misstep and go in the wrong direction too far. It is really good to get different opinions, mainly now because there really isn't a right answer.
Okay, good stuff. And this is the very last question here from Derek, who's asking me a quick answer. How much time do you spend tracking what your competitors are doing versus in your original strategy, more or less?
I'd say right now, I don't know about you, Kevin, but I'd say it's a little bit less than it was before. A lot of I wouldn't say we don't really have any direct competitors, but some of our competitors, so to speak, they're larger organizations, so it's very hard for them to pivot and move quickly, which is a huge advantage for us.
Yeah, I'd say less overall. The one thing that I have noticed is it is a time when we're almost like not banding together, but like talking to a lot of other procurement venture-backed companies and figuring out how do we accelerate together through this time. So we'd had a call today with a company that, not a competitor, but definitely in the same space. And it's a question of like, how do we both win in this market? Not a question of like, no, let's guard against what each other are doing and go head to head. So I think that is a theme that you'll probably see more and more. It's companies want to win together. So this might foster more of that.
Well, I have one last question for you, Tarek. Whose office did you break into?
This is a digital background. Thank you. Ian roll. This my apartment's behind me now.
Tarek just moved like 300 yards away from me.
He's in New York. That's the hotbed.
Well, you say I'm in New York, but guess what, man? San Fran.
Okay, guys. So we're wrapping up. Thank you so much for making the time. That was the very first episode of Finding the Bulls, how to get through this crisis and come out even stronger. Great and awesome to talk to you. Lots of little nuggets. Hope you guys do well. Stay strong. Stay healthy.
Great to have you guys.
Thanks for having us. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.